let us click this magic button, and sure, your keyboard is loud today.
It's very loud. Let me just do the "We are live." Oh, let me mute myself while I.
Yes, thank you, Darko. I really want to hear less of you. It's now so nice and quiet in my head, all alone. La-di-da. Cool. Now I have to grab my dog as well. So while we're waiting for everybody to join us quickly,
Okay.
I am quickly going to run that way. 2 seconds and back.
Okay. Cobus is getting the third presenter in, or getting her out, I think. As she apparently wants to try to leave the room. Hello and welcome to another edition of Dev Beard Ops with not Cobus and not Darko. This is the weekly stream, video, podcast, whatever you would like to call it, where two bald bearded guys talk about technology, usually DevOps and AWS cloud types of things. And remember, it's the beard on the inside that counts.
Yes.
So today we are starting off a different topic. If you have followed us for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about code testing strategies and how you should test your code and where should you test your code, and that testing is important.
Yeah.
But today, Cobus, what are we going to talk about today?
Yes. So, yes. Hi, my name is Strategies, and this is my co-presenter, Deployment. Yes. Today, we are going to be talking about, now that you've got your code well tested and you're sure that it works, because remember, you can always do that before you deploy. No, you can't. We are going to talk about all the different ways you can go about deploying it. And what we're going to do is we are going to be pulling from experience that we've had. And we're going to start off at what I called in the title, the YOLO deployment strategy, which is basically doing it by hand, doing it in a way that is literally just throwing the code at the server. There are a couple of ways you can do that. And there are a couple of ways that those things are terrible and how they can go terribly wrong. I'll also recount one of the other stories that I've shared before. In terms of like how rough it can be, and we'll get to that. So to kick things off, Darko, tell us about your most fun YOLO deployment style that you had. Actually, let's do two things. The worst one from like many years back before you knew better, and then one that you thought was good for that time given, let's say, constraints. Because I've got a nice story about my first proper deployment system like years ago.
Okay. First off, as any stream we start, just let us know if the audio is okay, because we can hear each other very good. I just want to make sure that we're relatively equal when it comes to sound loudness. So just let us know so we don't sound off. Yes, not Cobus, that's me, or Darko, or Deployment, whatever you like to call it. I love the comment here. The Beard Brothers Deployment and Strategies. We look like a crime duo. So let's talk about botched deployments that I worked on. And if you've been in the industry long enough, and when I say long enough, I mean just a couple of years, because it has changed really fast, you have experienced potentially something like this. Now, let me set the scene. I was a system administrator, or they would call it a system administrator 2 in the company I worked for. And
2.0.
2.0, yes. And we were split into the groups of like system admins, network admins, and we call them application folks, the developers, basically folks who were building this in-company application. And if I recall correctly, it was written in Java. Now, me and Java are just not the best of friends. And what happened is that my job was like when the application folks would develop a specific feature set or a new version of the application, my job was, as a sysadmin, because I guess that's what sysadmins do, was to deploy that piece of software. That's pretty simple enough, right? Yeah, of course. And basically we had a bunch of servers, virtual servers running under Citrix, if I recall correctly. And these were some application servers, Microsoft servers, where we would deploy the specific Java application. And I would get this piece of code, this compiled version, and a whole bunch of libraries that go along with it. And it was a Friday afternoon, because of course it was a Friday afternoon. It was a deadline. By Monday we needed to have the application out. Friday afternoon, hey Darko, can you please go ahead? This is tried and tested, deployed to production. I was 22 years old. I knew no better. They come out and give me the application on a shared disk, and I copy it to the server. I log into a server, basically drag and drop the application, start it off. That's fine. Ask them, hey, is this good? It's good. Perfect. Saturday rolls around. It's not good. Actually, because users started using it, it started breaking down. It started having performance problems because your application might work unless it's in production. So we deployed it. And well, actually, I deployed it, and I was immediately asked on Saturday, "Hey, roll back. This doesn't work. Let's get the old version out. Old version back in." The problem is I overwritten the old files. I basically went in, dragged, dropped the new version over all the other things, and I had to roll back to the old version. So I manually, I had copies of the old version somewhere, right, on the file share. The problem was some libraries that were extra were there. I missed some of the old libraries. So I actually spent most of the day trying to gather what exact things do we need for the old version. By the way, we didn't have a source controlled version or anything like that. No Git, no SVN, nothing. It was a folder on a shared drive. And I think I spent a good part of that weekend. I think Monday morning was when we actually finally managed to revert to the old version. And code is never tested until it goes to production. So no matter how the folks were, how much the folks were certain that, hey, this will work good, it didn't at the end. And the problem lay back on me because we had no automated deployment strategies. The deployment strategy was, yeah, boy, and that's it. So
see, that's why we call them deployment.
Exactly, that's why we call it deployment. And Cobus has a strategy apparently.
Wait, wrong side. That side. It's mirrored. It's weird.
Yeah, so that was like my first time. I was like, I'm never gonna do this again. I was like, this is bad, and I asked them like, why didn't you test your code? It's like, we did. How? And okay. To be honest,
compiled.
It compiled. To be honest, like I didn't know any of this back then. I was ways away from all of this, and like Fallon says here, like, what advice would I give myself? Like, automate everything, please. Don't do anything by hand. No matter how simple it looks like, you think like, oh, well, it's just a drag and drop. I'll just get the new version out there.
No.
And the thing is, mind you, even once I've deployed the application, I didn't know it was broken. I had no idea that it didn't work. And if for some reason I wasn't on call that weekend, they wouldn't be able to reach me and get me to fix it because I had no idea that it was broken. So I basically just got a page early in the morning Saturday that it is a problem. So,
nice.
But
the main takeaway from this one, I also had a similar incident at some point, is that when you start off at the very lowest level of deployment of literally just getting files onto the server, adding is easy. Removing, not so much. That's the problem. And I've had that before as well. For example, old logo files, old libraries, old code pages. Because if you did something like, let's say with PHP, and you've got some kind of auto routing set up, that page will still be there if you didn't delete the file. Guess what? It's going to run. So at the very least, have something that syncs the files to the location for you with delete, because that's the important part. But I mean, still, it's this is still in the YOLO deployments where it is potentially downtime where you might maybe stop the web server, chuck the new files in, start the web server, or if you are really brave, you just throw them across and hope things work and reload.
Yeah, and lucky for me and for the organization, we could have had downtime. Like, we worked only during the day, so it's not a global thing. In the evenings, we could easily have downtime for proper deployments and testing. But it was, as you say, a very YOLO type of deployment where I just copied the code, and because they told me it works. Trust but verify, please. Trust but verify.
Well, so they're basically the two lies the developers will always tell you. The first one is that this deployment will work, and the second one is if you want to know how long something is going to take. If they tell you it's going to be quick and it's going to be easy, they don't know what they're doing because everything in development takes longer than expected. I initially, when I gave estimates, was like, it'll take me a week. Then I started to learn better. Then I said, okay, well, whatever I think is going to take, double it. And then later, as a much more seasoned developer, I either tripled or quadrupled it, just because something will always come up. It's
Absolutely.
yeah. So
Before we continue, I just want to say hello, everybody, to chat. There's a bunch of comments here.
yes,
Hello, everybody.
and Edwin. Hey, Edwin.
Hey, we have Edwin from Ghana. Hey, Edwin. Hi. We have Fallen here. Okay. It's going to be actually recorded if you have a look at this. It's on the YouTube channel. So
I updated the graphics. Wait, this mirroring thing is very weird up here. Yeah. You can now find the final location for all of our streams if you want to go rewatch some of them.
Yeah, the recordings are going to be there. Absolutely. But Cobus, let me ask you now. So manual deployments are a thing, and let's not play the high card here.
No.
Always a manual deployment. And somebody commented here, I think William, SCP counts as deployment strategy. It does. I still work with some folks who need FTP access to a server to deploy their code.
Yep.
And that's just a reality of things. Now, we should try to teach people to not do it that way, because that's not the best way to do it. So when you do things manually, Cobus, how would you approach this in a very like, let's say you have to do it manually?
Yes.
How would you instruct young Darko to do it manually?
So let me tell you about what we had. How many years ago is it now? 15 years ago, 16, depending on how you count. So the thing is, remember, when you want to deploy, you want to have whatever's there to be replaced with something else. And you want a safety net. So at the very, very least, what you need to do is to either keep the current deployment intact and actually put the other one down next to it and then start that version up. So, for example, use folders with symlinks. Or if you need to put them in the same folder, because there are sometimes those kind of limitations where you don't have full access to the web server, where here's your deployment folder and that's it. What you would do is, step one, take whatever is there, zip up the entire thing, and store that at least somewhere where you've got a backup of it. And here's a pro tip, commands ready to unzip and replace the bad version you just deployed. That's one of the best things. Have a playbook for how to fix what you just did. And then what you do is clean that out and put the new version in. Or if you've got some mechanism like SCP or rsync or whatever it is with the correct flag to say, make sure that what I send is exactly what ends there. So in other words, include deletes on the destination side, because that's super important.
Yeah.
With a caveat, don't delete the images directory if you allow upload images, because that's also, ask me how I know.
But that's a good point. Like symlinks, like soft symlinks. Yeah, symlinks. Symlinks are just a great way to do it. By the way, symlinks are a term in Linux that you can link a virtual directory to an actual directory somewhere else. So that means you can have your web or HTML directory, for example, linked to a directory sitting somewhere else. And if you want to change version, you can just change the symlink to something else. An excellent way to update things manually. So never overwrite files, no matter how certain you are, because you are never 100% certain. Just a comment here from Saur Abashari. I'm sorry. Am I allowed here? I have no beard. It's the beard on the inside that counts. Everybody's allowed here. We tend to spur out our beards for some reason because we cannot grow hair. So I think that's the reason. Yes.
It's a life choice. Okay.
It's a life choice. Yes.
This is not a shaving accident. I promise. Really.
Yeah. So yeah, even if you're going to do it manually, there are some things that you can do. Like Hobu said, having a playbook, having a run book that tells exactly how to copy and replace the files when you need it, but also using things like symlinks. Can you do symlinks on Windows? I know you can have virtual directories.
You can. It's Jeepers, that will take me now back many years, more than a decade last that I used that. But you can. There are some caveats to it. There were some weird caveats with regards to applications and how they would traverse it and actually see it. Because in the command line, it would work. And something in my head now rings a bell saying that with apps, sometimes that didn't work, depending on, I think it was user permissions or something. It's something funky there that sometimes caused issues. Yeah.
It's a bit different on Windows, so just bear in mind. And there's a comment here from Asantos. Uploaded files via FTP in ASCII mode from Windows to Linux is really funny. All the file formats will be broken and deployment will fail. So Windows and Linux file formats, file landings, it can be difficult. So sometimes just make sure you use the correct transfer method in this case. So
yes.
Control C, Control V at the same time.
Yes. Noah Tree Perez says Control C and V, so copy and paste the code across. And yes, this leads me to my horror story of a place that I worked at when I walked in and looked at the deployment strategy, which was this a little bit more in the future because there was SVN and we actually used that. So yes, that indicates how old I am. But deployment consisted of step 1, remote desktop to the production Windows machine. Okay. Step 2, SVN checkout what was currently tagged as the current main branch.
Okay.
Step 3, cherry pick. So SVN cherry pick commits from certain branches that had features on, because remember, features are always just a little bit of code that you can just add to another bit of code and then they work, right? Okay. No, it's not. And cherry pick merge all of those into this main branch, rebranch that with a date suffix of main date, and then, and here's the kicker, open up Visual Studio, click publish.
Okay.
On the production machine.
A Visual Studio on the production machine?
Visual Studio on the production machine, because it had a publish button that can connect to IIS and then publish your application there for you with whatever values you needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bloody. I know that. I know you had to do it in IIS. Like, I never worked with IIS too much, but I know that you had to.
No, you don't have to publish it.
You don't have
There's
to publish
it? No, you could do publishing from the command line, and there are ways to do it. It had things built in to actually handle the swap over there are better ways to do it. And it's built in and it's there, but yep, that was just the way. But let me tell you about my first deployment system, which is years back, which makes this even funnier, which was at the time where there were no nice deployment mechanisms in place. It was a case of you need to CP your files to the server and actually deployment. So did you ever work with Ant?
No, I do not. Okay.
So Ant, or for those in Windows, they might have used it a couple of years later, Nant or NAT. And basically, you've got a lot of XML that you configure a build system with, and then you have different build commands. So what we had, and by we I mean the other smart guy that worked with Michael Sobremonte, had built a deployment system for us that would take our Java code, compile it, test it, zip it up in the format that we needed for JBoss deployments, generate an MD5 hash for that. Then, based on whatever config for deployment we did, it would SCP it across. On the other side, something watched through the file and would see that it was uploaded, then go grab the MD5 hash separately, because otherwise you're kind of defeating the purpose of doing MD5 hash checking. Check that the MD5 hash matches and that it's there. And then we would go in, and it was still manual deploys, but the manual deploy consisted of an ant deploy command that we would execute on the server. Because that scenario was we had to have downtime due to how JBoss handled the application with the things that we had in it. So it was like JBoss down. So we had this, when we did deployments, we were always on headphones or in the room talking together, like saying, okay, JBoss is down, hit deploy. And we use screens so everybody could have the same terminal open in front of them. Then you see, okay, cool, deployment is running. As soon as it's done, you say, cool, JBoss up, and boom, it went up again, and Ant handled all of this for us. And like I said, this was years ago.
Yeah. But
Ricardo.
Yeah, we have Ricardo here. Hi. We can actually, you can have manual deployments and still be okay. It's not very your time value friendly, but it is possible. It is possible to do that. Alex Masha, hey, welcome back. We haven't seen you here in a while. Noah Tree Perez, have you guys read Internet of Things by Bruce Sterling? I have not read that.
No, let me put that on my list.
Let's put it on the list. By the way, if you want to see a botched deployment, so think about it like this. If Cobus wanted to deploy to Berlin, you get me. Almost the same, but not exactly. A slightly worse version than Cobus because of a manual deployment. So think of us the two versions running in two different regions. But yeah. Oh, hey, Chris. Chris is here. Manual deployment, nightmare flashbacks. Everybody has manual deployment, nightmare flashbacks.
Oh, yeah.
But again, don't be dissuaded by that. It's okay to have manual deployments. Sometimes. If you cannot...
Yeah. Wait. We've got it. I've got the... Where's the banner? There we go.
Yes. It's okay to have manual deployments sometimes. So just be careful not to rely on manual deployments for really big things. And especially if you value your time and sanity. So Then let's move on from manual deployments. And we can talk horror stories. We can talk about good things with manual deployment. Your sim links, and all those things. But let's talk about automated deployments. I don't want you want to try to move away from that. And luckily, in the world of 2021, there are so many tools out there. There's so many frameworks, platforms, services, all the things that help you actually automatically deploy your code. And there's a lot of things about automatically deploying your code. So let's talk about them, Kobus. So how do we start?
Very simple.
Okay.
There's one place most people would start, and this once again gives away my age. And I remember I had to explain this to you, is Hudson.
Oh yeah, I still don't know what Hudson is, so I'm sorry.
Hudson is literally just a fork that is now called Jenkins. So Hudson was the original, and then they forked away and created Jenkins from it. Jenkins. Yeah. So the fun thing here is, even nowadays, if you look in the Jenkins code base, there's still a lot of the class libraries and things called Hudson. I remember the Butler icon was a bit different, but I can't remember what it looked like anymore.
Well, to be honest, like Jenkins, I'm a fan of Jenkins, but when you look at, I haven't used Jenkins in a while, but a few years back, Jenkins UI seems like it's from your period. It is a bit.
Wow, shots fired, eh? Your period.
It's a bit dated. I'm sorry.
Well, yes. Here's the thing. Use what works. If you've got a lot of people familiar with Jenkins, and if it gets the job done, use it.
I'm not saying Jenkins is bad by any means. It's an amazing tool. People get so much things done with Jenkins. I'm just saying it looks dated, which is not necessarily bad, because if you ever follow anything I post on Twitter, I love old things. I love how old things look, and so just keep up the work, Jenkins. Don't change.
Well, what you can do is you can use Jenkins X. I'm trying to see now what the UI looks like, because I've never actually fired it up, but I'm assuming it looks a bit different.
Jenkins X is the commercial version, right?
No. That will be CloudBees. Jenkins X is the Kubernetes native type version, in the sense that you deploy it on Kubernetes, and it knows how to spin up Kubernetes clusters and deploy to it, etc., and all of those things. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So many comments here that we have. Yeah, you go first.
Just comment on what Ricardo says. Before Jenkins, I used Continuum, which got me interested in this approach. I don't know what Continuum is. Like, that may show my age. I don't know. So that is something a bit different. But there's a bunch of comments here. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. The other one was here, as long as it's not using Java applets for the web UI. I see that, and I raise you JGoodies Java development more than 12, 13 years ago. And before JGoodies, which made our life super useful, because JGoodies allowed you to do like column-based designs in your UI. We used Java Swing directly with.
Okay.
We have to always calculate where the icons and things are. And doing things like resizing the window was a nightmare, because you had to figure out relative to the other buttons things, how the buttons are going to resize, manage all of that madness. And then we moved to JGoodies, and it was so good. And I think we moved from that to JSF, Java Server Faces. And for Java Server Faces, we moved one more. There was one more before. I want to say it was the Google Toolkit, JTK, or what is it called? Way back. But like I said, this is not many years ago. I can't remember anymore. But yeah, so no, don't joke this. We went through those stages. We dealt with that. Lots of fun.
I still remember websites that had like a Java applet.
GWT, there we go. And it's Ian. Good evening.
Hey, Ian. Hey, good evening, Ian. It's a bit late to you, I think. Yeah. But good evening and welcome to the stream. So let's talk about automated deployments. There's a lot of tools built in. Like we mentioned something, Jenkins. We mentioned Hudson, Continuum. As I said, there's a plethora of tools available for you to automatically deploy. Now, we're not going to go ahead and say, hey, use this tool, use that tool, because if a tool is used correctly and it is, good, it should do the job for you. Again, we work for AWS, and most of my deployment experience comes from code deploy, but some people might have other experiences and all the stuff. So let's talk about, if you're automatically deploying code, what different strategies do you have to deploy your code?
Before we get to that point, we first have to cover the two different ways to do that. Push versus pull. Because it's important, yes. Because it depends on how you approach this. Because If you want to get code onto a server, there are only two ways you can do that. Either you initiate a connection to the server, so it needs to have a port open, and you need to have credentials that you give it to be allowed in. And let's think SCP or whatever protocol you use to get the files into the server.
Okay.
And then the second way is if the server somehow knows how to pull the code at a specific point, which typically means that there's some kind of agent or daemon running on the actual server itself that connects somewhere or listens somewhere and does things. So those are the two things, and there are trade-offs with both. Because on the one hand, if you go the pull method, you need to install a daemon. That daemon needs to actually connect to central location. Central location needs to be available. It needs to keep common comms and be the same version, manage the agent, etc., etc. Whereas with pushing it, it sounds simpler because guess what? You don't need anything on the machine, but you need access to the machine. And that's often a blocker, especially in regulated environments.
But there's also a kind of a mix of that approach. Now, when I hear push versus pull, for me a pull is if you ever used Chef, and you did use Chef in the past. Chef is, for my case, a very typical pull method. Now it's not code deployment; it's configuration deployment. It's a very pull method because the agent checks in every 15 minutes, asking, "Hey, do you have new things for me? And if you do, give them to me." But code deploy has an agent running on an instance. And it doesn't pull. It sits there and listens until the service says, hey, here's code, deploy it. So I think that's kind of a mix between the two because there's a thing running on the box what's listening to.
But I would expect, because my experience with code deploy is that you don't need to open up a port on the box for that. The actual agent cells connects outwards. So yes, while you push code through that connection, the connection is initiated from the agent. And then that is how the communication, So
fair point.
Yeah.
Okay, so push versus pull.
Yes.
All my experiences were, again, with code deploy because I have the most experience with that. But again, there are other versions, and that can be, as Koba said, the push method where you actually push code to an instance without anything listening on the other side. Can be a problem because you need to open some transport ports between them, and those can be, your SSHs or STPs or FTPs, whatever you want, SMBs. But just be careful about those things because they can cause more problem than they can give things. So when it comes to automated deployments, Kobus, there are three big ones we like to talk about: in place, blue green, and canary.
Yes.
There's a mix of all of them to an extent, but let's start off with the in-place deployments.
Yeah.
What are in-place deployments?
Well, exactly what you would expect. It's like you've got a deployment and you replace it in place. So exactly where this thing at the moment is, you put the new version there. Now, the how you do the there is, once again, like we've mentioned, there are a couple of ways of doing it. Different directories, switch a symlink, back it up, zip it, move it, or literally just another folder, change a config in web server, say, okay, now you point there, or So that's basically in place. Or if your web server deploys, there are even some code, or some of them that deploy engage, long night, kids, that support in-place deployments or hot deployments, where you send the package directly to the web server and say, listen, here's the new version. It knows how to put that in place while routing connections that come into that new version instead of the old version, etc. Sorry, quick question here about rolling versus in place. Difference there is that we're going to get to rolling deployments where you do bit by bit, or blue-green, or canary, or shifting traffic. So we will cover rolling, but in place in this case is literally like you've got the site up, boom, new version is up, immediately everything goes there.
Yeah, exactly. The only differences between rolling and not rolling is that rolling just does it in increments. It deploys the code in increments. There are ways you can just immediately deploy the new version to all of your web servers. How good is that?
Automated YOLO. No, that one's called automated YOLO.
Automated YOLO. So be careful if you're using that. And there's a use case for that. Like if you need to just immediately switch through all the versions at once, be careful.
Or here's a kicker: if it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: let's say you've got a website that's purely outbound people view pages.
Correct.
If it suddenly changes under them, that's not going to break functionality for them or anything. It's like that's often the biggest discussion, because you might have a chat with someone saying like, listen, well, how does your application handle the SIG-term signals that the OS sends to it when it goes into shutdown mode with regards to hot connections that are currently being made? You kind of go like, it doesn't matter. Why would I spend time on that? So there's a very big it depends in this whole discussion.
Yes, exactly. Because if even if there is a tool or another way to do it to make it perfect, maybe you don't need it. There's just no need sometimes to do it. Like a lot of companies can't have downtime in a sense that you can just or have a change with static content that will not impact things. The problem is if you make a change that is not backwards compatible. So if you make a change that will change the database or make something like that your current code cannot no longer work, that's a problem where you would have to change it all at once. So once you start deploying, let's talk about rolling deployments, right? So let's say you have a cluster of 15 servers, and these 15 servers you run your amazing web application on, and you want to deploy the latest version of your PHP code. What you start doing is gradually deploying that code. So take the first 10% of the servers, deploy the code, see if it works, continue. Deploy the code, see if it works, continue. Just doing that constantly. Now, what I actually described here is Canary deployments.
No. I was about to say see that it works is the important part. That
exactly, that's the thing.
Depends. For rolling deployments, see that it works means process started up and accepts connection, nothing more.
Yeah, exactly. So you deploy it, see if it works, has it started up, and if it has, good, let's continue forward. And I'll explain how CodeDeploy does this, and other tools do it very similarly. So there's no magic to CodeDeploy. So what happens here? I used to be a subject matter expert on CodeDeploy in my former team.
Ooh,
so I still remember things. Your code, so you announce new version of your code to CodeDeploy and tell it, make a roll and deploy 20% at a time. Yeah, an SME. So it takes the artifact you have and chooses 20% of the instances and takes the code, copies it to the instance, and replaces the code. It just changes the code in production. Now, there's a bunch of things you can tell it to, like before replacing the code, stop this service or run this script or do that or do the other thing. It replaces the code, starts up the new script or starts up the applications and see if it has successfully started up. If it has, it reports back to CodeDeploy saying, hey, the deployment has been successful, carry on. So in that sense that's a kind of a rolling deployment that checks, does the code work or has it started? I want to say one beautiful thing about CodeDeploy is that it can roll back. So if the code has broken, if the code cannot start, it will say unsuccessful deployment and automatically replace the files with the old versions, because CodeDeploy by default keeps 5 versions of the code somewhere on the box.
Yes. I would be able to tell you if you give me a keyboard and I can autocomplete, because I used to do that a lot. Go in to look at the old deployments, scratch around, see what is wrong. Yeah.
Darko's me. Yes, Darko is Cobus. Super Mario expert. I would like to call myself a Super Mario expert because I played Super Mario a lot, but not an expert. Cluth, we are not twins. We are almost twins. We're separated by at least 10,000 kilometers. He's based in South Africa. I'm based in Berlin. Yes, it's the beard and the baldness that gives it away. Hence, the beard ops.
Yes. So, but fun story quickly with CodeDeploy. So back in the days where there's this saying that says, "I'm not young enough to know everything." I used to, be able to solve every single problem I came across. I mean, I was young enough for that. And nowadays, I'm like, wow, it depends. Let me find out a little bit more first. Yeah. But basically, then back then, it was like this was before container orchestration systems were popular, and I was like, I love CodeDeploy. We're moving from CodeDeploy from deploying directly to using containers. So you know what? I can do Bash. I'll write some start and stop scripts and deployment scripts that I bundle into my CodeDeploy, and that's how we do it.
Yeah.
Fun fact here is that this is where I had to learn, because I knew about exit codes in the operating system, and the maximum is 128, I believe, in terms of the default value. Except that CodeDeploy was throwing an exit code 137 for me, which is like, because I was going like, that's not possible. Then digging into it, and then what it boils down to that is that there's an overflow mechanism. If this process was killed by another process, it would add that other process's kill code on top of it or something like that. Basically, it means that there was another process involved, which was the first hint. Because what I had done is that when the container is running, there was a process there that I needed to kill. And I searched for I can't remember exactly what the thing was, but 4 or 5 letters based on that, because that was the default that we call it. No worries. Worked on all the services except this one, because this one service's zip file or some part of the code deploy system ended up having those first 4 letters as the process name. And then what would happen is code deploy would execute the script that does the deployment that kills the process, which is code deploy, and then flop. Yes. Lesson here, don't deploy your containers by hand. Use the things that are available for it.
There's always tools out there available to help you with that, so please try to use them. It will make your lives easier.
Yeah.
A comment here from ZB_C. Does the rollback happen automatically, or do you need some sort of a setup, like deploy v3 if v4 fails? In code deploy, it's all automatic. So what will happen with code deploy, if you are deploying a new version of code in your rolling deployment, if the deployment fails, that is, if the service cannot start, it automatically fails back or rolls back to the previous good version, which is most likely the previous version running the code.
Bring up your little thingy. There's one caveat here.
Okay.
Which is, if you had a scaling event during deployment time, because remember, it needs to have the previous copy on the physical server. So what happens is if you start deploying and you bring up a new service or new server, at that point, it'll speak to code deploy and say, listen, give me the latest version, which is now the version being deployed. And then when it tries to deploy that deployment fails, there is no previous zip to go back to. So that it's a bit of an edge case, but it is an interesting one to deal with.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things, but usually if it's on a fixed infrastructure thing that doesn't scale as much, you can quite easily roll back to the previous version without anything you have to do. So it's all automatic. ZBC had the exact same issue. It's been a pain. And I get that. And sometimes it had happened. And I worked in premium support, and I worked with customers who had the exact same problem. Deployment would fail during a scale event, and then they cannot get the good version on it. The thing, what happens there is the deployment will fail, and it will cancel itself. So the deployment will no longer run. When your scaling event happens again, it will actually deploy the latest version of the code. So
the previous version.
The previous version, yeah. So,
I was going to say, because that's one way to do it. But just remember here, you need to link your EC2 instance, the scaling. When you look at the health check, it needs to be your ALB or ELB and not EC2, because what can happen is that if the instance comes up and its health check is just EC2, it means if the basic health checks is the box up and responsive, passes, that box will stay up. Whereas if you link it to the load balancer, if the load balancer says this instance is not healthy, let me kill it. What will happen then is you had the bad deployment, it can't start up. Load balancer takes a bit of time to see that it's not working, kill it off, spins up a new one, and that's then when what Darko talks about, the old deployment kicks in.
Correct. Cool. So let's kind of move on from rolling deployments. So rolling deployments are
how to get away from these problems.
How to get away from these problems, because rolling deployments, while they are good and simple and can solve most of your problems, there are better ways to do it. So there are different ways. I wouldn't call them better, but there are different ways to do it. They have all of their own ups and downs. But let's talk about the thing called blue-green deployments. So blue-green deployments. What are blue-green, or they used to be called sometimes blue-red. I've heard a lot of different approaches. There you go, blue-green. I was looking for something blue and green. I don't have anything.
I've got this cough medicine and what's this, Q20.
Okay. So what are blue-green deployments? Let me actually try to illustrate. I have things here, but they're not blue and green.
Oh.
They're hard.
Pretend they're blue and green.
Pretend this is blue. This is your current running version of your website sitting on your server, right? And then you decide, hey, I want to deploy the latest version of my code. But instead of copying the code to this disk or to this set of servers, you actually spin up an exact copy of the same cluster twice. And this exact copy gets the latest version of your code. So you deploy the code on the new cluster, on the new things running, new instances, new set of all the things, right? And see if it works. Does it start up correctly? Any problems happening on there? You can actually test it out before before it goes to production, you can have a specific separate URL or endpoint to test out your green version of the code.
Yeah.
Then if green works, if you are satisfied with it, you say, okay, let me switch traffic. So what happens on top, on the network layer, on the load balancer, you basically reroute traffic from blue to green, and then green is blue. Then green is the thing that runs your code right now, and this is what is serving your customers.
Yeah.
Why is this good, Cobus? What helps us? What does blue-green do for us?
It's great because if you stuff up, you just go back to the traffic layer and say, please send everything to where it came from before. This new version doesn't work, which means that it's such a case of configs, poof, the traffic shifts. And we're talking about milliseconds to seconds in terms of doing that. Okay, big caveat here, sorry. I need to, because I've seen this. If you use a load balancer to handle that kind of routing for you, if you're using DNS, that is up to 48 hours. Also, once again, ask me how I know how you can screw up a production that way. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You don't want to use DNS to rely on DNS to do a version change. No. Yeah.
A very good point. So if I had a banner, I would put it up. Do not rely on DNS for version changes because it's DNS.
Once again, caveat, unless you're using Route 53 health checks, there's some very smart things in there that does things with virtual IPs and things, but I'm talking about general DNS. If you have your own DNS that you manage and you clickety-click, don't do this.
Yeah. There's a way to do it with Route 53 because Route 53 has aliases and health checks, and aliases actually can do much faster reroutes or changes in the backend than your DNS request. I have no idea how that works, but there's a it works in some way. So using this network layer, using this load balancer, the endpoint, the API gateway, whatever you have on the front, to just point it to different backends. It doesn't have to be a backend per se. To different code sources, to different set of servers, to a different cluster, to a different bucket, to something else that contains your new version of code. And as Kobe said, if this fails on you, you can just easily flip back to the other one because I know that one works. And the beauty of it, it's instant. So it is once you flip the switch, all of your customers will get the new version or the old version of the code. So
which is both good and bad.
Yeah.
Because it's great if it works. Good case scenario. It's bad if 100% of your customers are unhappy because guess what? Your site just broke.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So Ian has a comment here. I've had conflicting arguments on exact difference, but red-black is a specialization of blue-green that forces traffic to be only targeted at one endpoint, rather than the tiny period where there could be both traffic to both. Well, okay, so in my view, there's only traffic to one. And now I may be conflicting things, but when I think of blue-green, when I say a traffic switch, I mean immediate traffic switch to just one. So your customers are hitting blue at one point, and once you're happy with green, just switch them all over to green. Maybe we're talking something different here, but maybe there's another version of blue-green. I don't know. I haven't heard about it, so feel free to put your comment. Sorry?
I'm quickly Googling it, and the first hit that I have is exactly this. It's from Developer Zone, which says, in blue-green deployment, both versions may be getting requests at the same time, temporarily, while red-black, only one of the versions is getting traffic at any point in time. And this is what you said, is because when you do that traffic switch over, there is a case of some connections still on the old version, while most are being moved to the new one. Yeah.
It could be due to session stickiness, I would say. Like that's my question here. Is that due to session stickiness, or is that due to the fact that I will still allow a certain percentage of my users to use the old version? Because that's a different thing then. So, but I have not used it. I mean, in my mind, you would most of the time immediately switch over all of the customers, and there will be some session stickiness. For example, if somebody has a session open on a registration page or a shopping cart, they will most likely stay on the old one until the connections drain, and then they will start using the new version.
Lots of it depends is there in terms of your architecture.
Yeah,
if preferably you don't have sticky sessions. Yeah.
Right. Well, you can have session cookies, stored somewhere externally and then use it like that. So for that case, but sometimes it's needed, right? You don't want to drop people off in the middle of their shopping and they will not buy anything. So from that perspective, that's kind of a thing.
But I mean, the challenge with this is that we have this problem of either everybody goes over or nobody goes over, and it's either everything is broken or everything is good, which obviously is not ideal.
Yeah.
Which is why we've got more.
It's expensive. You have to have double the capacity at all times. So that's a problem.
You have to have double capacity during the period of deployment. Not at all times, which if you're in the cloud world and you can just elastically spin up some extra ones per second billing, that's not too bad. Except, caveat, if you ever hear the term high watermark billing, beware.
Okay.
Yes. So I had this beautiful deployment set up a few years back, which we used auto-scaling groups. We baked our AMIs every Sunday to be fully patched with all the versions and things. And what happened is Monday morning, for the development environment, we updated the auto-scaling group to the new AMI. And then it would double capacity because then it brings up using the new AMI. And then our termination policy was oldest first. So what it would then do is then use the new AMI, deploy the code onto it with code deploy, make sure everything's working, and then 15 minutes later would shut down or half the capacity again, which means it deleted the old half. So every Monday we could just flip our servers, which is awesome. Except during that period, we had double the normal count of servers running for that 15-minute period. So 4 or 5 times a month, depending on how many weeks and where the Monday fell, we had twice as many. And then after the first month of implementing this, we got a bill from one of our third-party services, and it was double. Because guess what? We suddenly had 30 servers instead of 15, so we're billing you for 30. And that's where we went like, whoa, have you got per minute billing or something?
Be careful about that. So when we're talking not the cloud, when we're talking your own infrastructure, in that case, you need to have double infrastructure. You need to have double capacity. You need to, if you're doing licensing, be careful of the high watermark licensing, as Kobe said. If you have high watermark licensing, you will be billed for the highest amount of services you use at one point. So be careful about that. But if you're in the cloud, you only need this capacity, or you need to scale up to double the amount of things you do during deployments. Now that's in any case more expensive than not having that, because you have to spin up the copy of your production system, at least a portion of your production twice, so you can handle the new load or the new version, which can be a problem, right? I've spoken to customers that I suggested that they do blue-green, and they said they cannot because it's too expensive. And it's it's fine if you have 5 servers, right? It's not expensive. But if you have a 5,000 server cluster, then you can have a problem with that. So just to answer a couple of questions here, we have a couple of things here. Gaelic God, is that session stickiness depending on the ALB? Yes, the load balancer has session stickiness configured on itself. And as long as there are sessions enabled on it, it will drain the connections, and then it will release them all. So,
and caveat to that as well, as certain web servers, depending on how you build the application, might be, contain server-side context of the user connection in that one server, which means if your request now routes elsewhere, that context is gone. So that's also where you get stickiness, which is why you would want that on the load balancer to make the session sticky. Exactly.
And if you're using like cookies for your sessions, the best thing is to have, especially on a clustered system, to have cookies stored elsewhere. For example, like an Elasticache cluster or a Memcache, somewhere externally that you can query those cookies no matter what the production system is running. Stephen Mangudi, are you recording the live cast? Absolutely. So this live cast, the stream will be available on that Not Cobus, Not Darko YouTube channel. So make sure to check them out there. And all the previous ones are there. If you want to hear...
And hit the subscribe button.
Smash the lucky button and all the stuff. So we post all of the content there. These are all streams. So it's if you like to listen to two guys talk about some technology in the background, so please do that. We're always happy to do that. Noah 3 Perez, what is high water licensing? Cobus.
So for those of you that have been to a beach and seen it, is that typically, let's say there's some debris on either the beach itself or in the ocean, let's say like branches or rubbish or something. What happens is, as the tide comes in and it comes to high water, at some point it reaches the peak where this is the highest the water ever goes, and it goes away again. And what that results in is on the actual beach itself, because they all tend to be a bit slanted, it will leave a line of debris that you can literally see. And that's called the high watermark. Now, how this applies to licensing is that we look at the graph of all the different servers in terms of how many you have. Whatever was the peak, so the highest instance count at any point in a time period, so for example, a month, we use that as the mechanism to bill you for. So in the one I gave is that if we spike to 50 servers once in the month, and the rest of the time we run 20 servers, we will be billed for 50 servers, not 20, because we're using the high watermark licensing.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes some services are doing that. Again, I don't think there's any service on AWS that does that unless you are doing workspaces, because if you're using workspaces per month billing, even if you spin up a workspace just for a day, you will be charged for the entire month if you're using per month billing. So be careful on the high watermark billing approaches, especially on Blue Green, but it doesn't apply in this case. So ignore what I said. Thank you very much, ZBC, for the feedbacks. We like that you enjoy the stream, so please do come back every week. Bokyo, it can take a few days to test everything. Everything automatic and dedicated QA people do as well. That's a great point. So Blue Green, it's not as instant as you think. If you launch, your blues and your greens, and then sometimes the green environment, the new code, needs to be up for a day or two, because you have QA, you have people, you have user acceptance testing, a bunch of different testing it in a production scale approach to see if that works. And then once they're satisfied, somebody hits the switch button, and then it goes to actual production. So that's where the cost can also come in.
Quickly, just to a further question on the high watermark billing here from Noah Tree Perez, and that is for the billing deployment strategy in some case. Am I understanding? Yes. So what it does is that in this case, it was a third-party application we installed on the server that did some things for us. And what they said is that every single time we see a copy of that, we count the total copies at any point in time, whatever the most is. So literally every time you spin up a new box and it's one more than the previous, you charge for one more. Whereas if you shut down one other machine and you spin up a new one and you add then it would be the same cost, because you had 6, then you had 5, then you had 6. So the highest is 6.
Yeah, exactly. So
cool.
It applies sometimes, especially if you have specific software, specific licensing on something. So be careful on that. Ian says ACM PCA 2 if he recalls correctly. So there could be some AWS services that, but again, in this case, it doesn't really apply should not apply to your blue green deployments, especially on a more traditional approach. But just be mindful of that.
But we have got 7.5 minutes left, and we need to cover traffic
Canary
shifting and also Canary deployments. And just before we get in that, just a quick injection about containers and why they are so popular with this as well. It's like
how about this? Let's leave Canary deployments and observability for production for next week, and we'll just finish up with this thing. So next week we're going to continue on Canary deployments and the other things, still deployment strategies. But right now let's finish off containers and traffic shifting.
So the big benefit that came about with containers is the fact that your entire application is contained. Get it? Which means that in this blue-green world, when you spin up a second version, remember on a server, you tend to have to worry about the runtime, the libraries, the versions, all of those things. Which means you can't necessarily, let's say you're jumping from Java 7 to Java 8, well, I can't remember if Java 7 actually came out. You need to install that runtime, be able to reference it, etc. Where with containers, it's inside this little box. So version 7 is up and running. You can bring up a second one with version 8 and your new version of the code. The only thing is that you obviously need to make sure that there aren't any port conflicts, and that you can have on the load balance level to be able to shift traffic then on a port basis. So just quickly, that's one of the ways you can avoid the cost scenario. With the caveat, obviously, you've got capacity with memory to actually spin up a second version on the same machine.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of times when you deploy blue-green on different machines, you will use a different set of ports, right? Like even if you're not doing containers, you will use a different port for the endpoint. But especially for containers, I think that's key, because I remember a time when you could just have a single port on a container that can be only bound to a single one, no dynamic porting and all that stuff. So be careful with that. But containers make it much easier. I would say that containers make it so much simpler, because it's just a container that can sit on any machine. So you don't have to worry too much about actually deploying the code. the copying of the code and all those things. So yeah. Thank you for all the amazing comments, Noah, Saurab, and Fon20. We love that you enjoyed these things, and please do tune in more often. Every Wednesday we do the same thing, so join us. We like talking about these kind of things. We tend to go on tangents. So, for example, today we wanted to cover it all, but hey, you never can with these things. So we keep on just.
So are we gonna do the traffic shaping, or we leave that for next time to leave them hanging so they have to come back?
Let's do a cliffhanger next week at the same time at the same place. Yeah. We're going to be continuing talking about deployment strategies and talking about traffic shifting, Canary deployments, but also observability in production, or actually monitoring stuff in production. Follow, subscribe, and all the smash things. Yeah, Ian, and you keep on distracting us, and we'll just stream. We don't mind.
I can actually give you the ultimate cliffhanger. Okay. At some point, and I'm not going to promise when, because I need to drag this out as much as possible. Okay. I will tell you the story about how I got fired because of Jira time estimates in terms of the projected release date.
Ooh, interesting.
And by fired, I mean it was literally a case of Sunday afternoon. Hey, by the way, this is happening. Yeah. Here's your ticket. Tomorrow morning, you're on the plane. You're going back home.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, a question here from Noob Power. Hi, Darko and Kobus. Thank you for your content. Little question. In your opinion, what is the best deployment strategy for state machines and step functions? Okay, so go ahead, Kobus. I will leave this one to you because I really don't know.
The one that works for you.
Oh, we're sorry. It's a horrible answer. But,
no. Okay, apologies. I've got the correct answer. Yeah, I just need to click on it again, which is cool. So for state machines, so the reason here is that in a state machine, you've got lots of different functions that you can call, and it depends in terms of like those versioning. So the first question I would ask is, are these functions all inside the same single project? Because if that's the case, there is a way where, remember, when you deploy a Lambda function, there's always an alias created for latest. But when you deploy a new version, you do have the previous versions available. I think it's up to the last 10, if memory serves, but it could be 5, which means what you can do is explicitly in your state machine, define the version of the Lambda function and not use latest. So, for example, use the hash of the build or a version number or something, which means that you can then go deploy the newer version of the Lambda function. And this applies as well if you've got multiple different repos. And then once you're ready, then what you do is you update your state machine to say, okay, cool, now use these new ones. Now, granted, what will happen then is when the state machine is in progress, my understanding, at least, and I'll have to go double check, is, or let me rephrase this. The expected behavior I would have is that once the state starts executing, it'll use whatever it was configured with at that point in time to then use, because you don't want to change flow mid-process.
You should never do that. It can cause problems.
So my expectation is this is how the state machine and step functions would work, is that complete the execution of that state in terms of the state machine, and then only use the new state, because you could change the flow and everything.
The problem is with long-running state machines. If you have a long-running state machine, and that can happen, you can have 24-hour long-running state machine. So that's a problem. Even in that case, you do not want to change it midway, because you don't know what kind of a change it impacts the entire flow.
But it does come down to how near real time do you want this to kick in? Because if you think about it this way, is that I want to deploy right now, which changes the flow of how I do things. There's a reason for this, but this reason was fine 5 minutes ago. So if this one transaction still finishes in the old way, whatever I'm doing, I obviously have a strategy to change that data or correct the data or deal with that data. So just think about how to apply that to running processes, and once they're complete, how to flag them and process them.
Correct. Okay, well, we hope that answers your question, New Power. Before we head off, can I shill something? I love shilling stuff on this stream. We haven't used the shill jar in a while, and I think Kobus has lost it, so I'm good. So I would like
I've got it.
You got it. Okay.
But, just remember, my sidekick might not approve.
That's a flashback. So I just want to share a thing I've been working on. I've been working on like writing more and just spending every day to do a bit of blogging. I found that I enjoy it a bit more now, and I've actually have a small blog thing I have written, and where I post random things. They're all tech related. but they're not necessarily always AWS related. So if you are interested in learning how I do things with Vim and my colors and the lol banners and I even have some things with what did I talk about, like installing Windows 2000 on a physical hardware. So check out the blog. There is no subscribe or follow button on. There is an RSS feed if you're into RSS feeds, because yes, Mr. Sidekick.
Can I get the lights?
Smash the RSS subscribe button.
Working. Yeah.
Oh man, I wish we had RSS more. Where is Google Reader when you need it? So yeah,
I missed that.
Check it out if you find that interesting. I keep on trying to post every week something there. So it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek post, a bit more on technology. Oh, bye. Okay,
we are on.
Everybody,
we need
thank
to
you
go.
very much.
Thank
Next week, same time. Goodbye. We love you.